welcome to the economic outlook for Nigeria. The new normal, your money or your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wade, for that beautiful introduction. Let me once again thank everybody for tuning in to this very important webinar. We aptly chose the topic, the new normal, your money or your life, because that basically describes the kind of quagmire we all find ourselves in today. We're in a world where economies, businesses, politicians are at odds. What do we choose? Do we choose to work and continue to make money so that we can pursue our livelihood and our dreams, or do we choose health, our life, basically? So the world has never been in this kind of situation where it's got to choose between making money and, of course, staying alive. So it's a tough choice, and we have here as panelists super human beings, super Nigerians. Never been so proud to have this set of people on stage today, on a virtual stage, that is, to look at this issue. So we've got wide range of topics we're going to discuss today, and I'm pretty sure that anyone who is logged in here is definitely going to go away with something very valuable, something very useful. Whether you're an SME, whether you're a retail investor, even if you're a government official, there's something here for you to learn. And I hope that at the end of this session, all of us Nigerians, whether you're in Nigeria, whether you live abroad, wherever you find yourself in, I hope that there's some useful nuggets in here that you can pick. I've also got my own pen and paper, just by the way, because I'm also going to be taking a few notes as well from these amazing people here. And I'm going to be introducing them right away. So if you could move the screen to the very first panelist that I'm going to introduce. Could you move the screen? Move the slides. So the very first person is our dear Dr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Dr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is the founder of Flying Doctors Healthcare Investment Company. I'm sure a lot of you who are vested in social media know so much about her already. Dr. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is the founder of Flying Doctors. The Flying Doctors Healthcare Group invests and operate across the healthcare and wellness value chain in hospitals, clinics, construction and refurbishments, diagnostics. I mean, you have it all there. She is super human being, super innovator, and she's also young, and trying to basically change business in Nigeria. So she's also not just a founder, she's also an investor. So she looks for businesses that she can invest in, puts her money where her mouth is, and I'm sure that there's useful nuggets that she's going to share here for us. So she's going to be talking a lot about healthcare and SMEs as well as startups. So if you're a startup founder out there, then you got to stay logged into the end of this, because she's going to share useful nuggets. And the next important panelist that we have on stage today is my very good friend. Should I add doctor as well? Because this guy has a wealth of knowledge. You think he's a professor. So this is 𝗧𝗵𝗲. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is a super accountant like me. We're very smart people. Super accountant and policy analyst. So 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is an accountant based in the UK. He's been in the financial services sector for over 10 years. If you're one of those people who follow him on social media, you can see how vast it is when it comes to policies and when it comes to ideas, especially economic ideas, that should shape sub-Saharan African countries like Nigeria and help us move from what you call third world economy to the first world economy where he resides. So 𝗧𝗵𝗲 lives in the UK with his family and occasionally comes to Nigeria a lot. So he's very, very well vested in this country. So I'm pretty sure that you're going to pick up a lot of stuff from him today as well. And I'm going to move on to the next panelist today. Yes, I'm sure some of you also know Cheta. So if you're somebody who better you're driving to work, on the Monday or Friday morning, and you're waiting to listen to intelligent discussions, views about happenings in Nigeria, be it security, country risk, politics, this is the go-to guy. And 𝗧𝗏 is not just an household name in Nigeria. People all over the world, especially foreign investors, speak to this guy if they're trying to get a view of Nigeria, especially from the foreign risk side. So it's important that even if you're an investor, you want to hear 𝗧𝗏 today. So 𝗧𝗏 is the lead partner of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Intelligence and heads the research desk. And he has worked in numerous information technology and media organizations, key among them Daily Times, 234 Next, where he basically caught his teeth. And 𝗧𝗏 is he probably would read a lot of his views in several websites: Economist, Financial Times, The Guardian, SuperSport. So this is somebody who is well vested as well in Nigeria, whether it's the economy or politics in general. So I'm pretty sure that if you're here and you're trying to say, look, what government policy is likely going to shape my investment decision, then 𝗧𝗏 is here to explain that to you. If you're also very worried about security, I mean, security is an important part of where you decide you want to put your money, and then you better stay tuned till the end, because 𝗧𝗏 is definitely going to throw in a lot of nuggets in here. So I'm moving to the last but not the least panelist here, my very good friend, one of the most intelligent young economists we have in Nigeria today. If you haven't been following this guy on Twitter, please follow him at 𝗏𝗳 𝗵𝗲. 𝗏𝗧 𝗚𝗏 superintends the investment research function at 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Pensions Limited. He's basically head of research there. He's an investment professional, also a chartered financial analyst. And he prior to joining 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Pensions, 𝗏𝗧 worked as a fixed income and currency specialist at Ecobank, where he was responsible for tracking developments in debt and currency markets across 33 African economies. 𝗏𝗧 also worked at ARM, where he basically caught his teeth. And this is some guy who is vast in this economy. Like, he's like an economic encyclopedia for Nigeria. So be it, whether you want to invest in the stock market, whether you're looking at the macro, economic impact of decision making on your investments, that this is the guy that you want to listen to. So we've got a bumper package for you guys today, and I hope that at the end of this session, you're going to be going with something very useful. And of course, you can always thank us at the end of the day. So remember to drop in your questions, make them short and straight to the point, and then direct it to whoever you want to respond to your question. So we'll start first of all. Oh my God, 𝗏𝗧 already introduced himself already, so there's no need to introduce 𝗏𝗧. So, but basically, we're going to start with a presentation. 𝗏𝗧 𝗚𝗏 is going to just take us through macroeconomic outlook for Nigeria. He did this in the first session we had in January. We do this every quarter, by the way, so just in case. So he's going to be doing a presentation, and then up next will be 𝗧𝗏 giving us a bit of country risk and security outlook for Nigeria. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this session. Handing over to 𝗏𝗧. I'll be back at the panelist discussion. Thank you.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, just waiting for slides to come on. Or maybe I'll share my screen. Okay. Just waiting for the slides to come on. Okay. Okay, pending when the slides come on, I'll just run through maybe just briefly what's happened in the first quarter of 2020. I think what we're seeing is everybody, I mean, most of what has happened is well known. You've had oil prices, COVID. I mean, COVID importantly has been the biggest disruption we've seen to human life, well, not just to human life, but also to economics since World War II. I think this is perhaps the biggest shock mankind has faced in terms of disrupting human activity, economic activity we've ever faced. And what it's done is that it's caused a lot of movements across financial markets, mostly negative movements. So we've seen oil prices, which is very important for Nigeria, come off significantly. In the first quarter, I mean, the IMF has had to revise its outlook for global growth for 2020. I think what they're calling is the Great Lockdown. The Great Lockdown, and the view generally is that the Great Lockdown will drive a global recession in 2020. Most people are having to stay at home. We've lost almost 2 months of economic activity, where people just, a large portion of the world population was just housed internally or just locked in their houses, not much economic activity going on. So that has resulted in, generally, the IMF is looking for global recession this year, much more worse than we saw in 2009. And so I think that sets the stage across board. In terms of Southern Africa and Nigeria, the outlook essentially is for also a recession as well. Southern Africa is expected to contract. Nigeria is also expected to contract. South Africa is also expected to contract. For Nigeria, I think the key drivers is because non-oil is the largest share of the Nigerian economy, and Nigeria is not as, I would say, not a digital economy like you would say like other economies, whereas a lot of people all over the world could, in advanced countries, could have a lot of their businesses go online, or aside, as in outside of, people could have to work outside of home or work from home. I mean, power supply is close to 100% in most countries. Power is very stable. Broadband is more accessible. In Nigeria, we don't have that. We cannot afford that because power supply is not as stable as we have, and then also internet connectivity is not something that we also have across. So the non-oil economy is likely going to go into recession. The oil side, primarily because of the lower oil price as well. I think also OPEC is also asking us to also make some cuts as well. Generally, everybody expects the Nigerian economy to go into a recession. Still, my slides are still not yet up. I'm trying to, okay. I'm just wondering, my slides up now. Okay. Can everybody see my slides? Sorry.
I think they are coming up, so we'll just wait a bit.
Okay. It's off now. Okay, it's off. Yeah, so I think what I just said in the first few minutes was just, yes, global economy pretty much going into a recession is supposed to go into a recession in 2020. And that's just primarily because we expect most human activity to be done offline, and it's not possible. So it's not possible for a large share of the world to do that. So generally, I think most people sort of expect the global economy to go into a recession. Now, how have policymakers or how have economic policymakers responded across the world? What we've seen is that monetary policy, fiscal policy has just turned accommodative because we're facing the greatest human crisis. It's a health crisis as well. So it has to be a humane response. And so governments, policymakers are doing everything. They're putting all the stops to just ensure that the global economy, people don't suffer a lot. And so what you're seeing is that interest rates have come down across most countries in the world. In advanced economies, interest rates are at zero or even in negative territory, like in the European Union, you see policy rates have become negative. There's also been a wash of quantitative easing programs. So central banks are essentially buying up government debt, providing all kinds of finances to government to enable them carry out stimulus or inject stimulus or pay salaries or do what they have to do to ensure that people's livelihoods don't suffer because of COVID. And so that's the pattern across advanced economies. Emerging markets like ourselves as well, you've also seen the same pattern as well. Most emerging market economies, I think this chart from Bloomberg just shows most countries are actually cutting interest rates. However, Nigeria is one of the very few outliers this year where you haven't seen a rate cut. I mean, even in sub-Saharan Africa, you have seen interest rates. Ghana has cut interest rates. Ghana has slashed interest rates. South Africa has cut interest rates. Namibia, quite a number of countries have also had to cut interest rates just to be able to support the economy. And I think the pattern generally for the rest of the year is that you continue to see these rate cuts across most countries. Most countries will cut interest rates just to try and support the wider economy and small businesses. For commodity markets, I think the most important commodity for Nigeria is oil. What we've seen is that crude oil prices have fallen to levels that most people alive today haven't seen. And I mean, we had negative crude oil prices.
Wale, sorry for interjection. Could you expand your slide so that our viewers can see everything here? Thank you.
Slideshow now. Is it fine? Is it on slideshow now? On slideshow now. Is it fair? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Um, so for oil markets, for crude oil markets, we've seen this huge collapse in global crude oil consumption. And that's just because most people aren't flying. Countries have shut down transport links. A lot of transportation isn't going on. Energy needs are much lower now because you don't have as much factories being online. And so I think the key thing is that demand has fallen. People estimate between 20 to 30 million barrels per day of crude oil demand has come off the global oil market. So in order to sort of offset that pressure, OPEC and pretty much a coalition of the entire oil producing countries globally, I mean, for the first time ever, we had OPEC and non-OPEC countries come together to agree some form of output reduction or try to just sort of ensure that the collapse you've seen on the demand side is sort of matched on the supply side. And so you've seen, I mean, although they were not able to get as much as 20 million barrels per day, but they've been able to cobble together between 10 to 13 million barrels per day. And then some other countries have also chipped in to do more. And so what you've seen is that after collapsing in the first quarter of 2020, crude oil prices have sort of stabilized and are starting to sort of move towards 30, 35. I mean, generally, I think most people now expect that because of the cuts you're seeing across the board. So the fact that a lot of private oil companies, particularly in the US, shale oil producers are also having to sort of reduce their output because at current oil prices, certain fields or certain oil, producing oil in certain fields is no longer economical. And so it just makes sense for people to just turn off the tap, because if you're losing money on operating it, then it just makes sense to just turn off the taps. And so what you're generally seeing is the supply side of crude has essentially had to make adjustments, and those adjustments have helped stabilize oil markets. And I think the worst you could say is sort of behind us, and what we just have to say is maybe some stability at these levels, and then as demand recovers, maybe we see a pickup. But in terms of whether crude oil prices go back to where they're coming from, I think it's a big ask, because what COVID has done is there's still going to be some form of lockdowns. Aviation, people aren't still going to fly as much as we used to fly because of health concerns. You still find and then importantly is that a lot of things that people travel for will be moved offline rather. The world of remote work. So a lot of travels that people used to make previously will no longer have to. That will no longer be the case. And so you find more people. I mean, Zoom. We're now having to get into the world of Zoom. So a lot of travel will just sort of go offline. So some of these structural changes just mean that crude oil demand is not going to return back to where it used to be. And so you might have to live with more subdued crude oil prices for a while. Yeah, for Nigeria, the worst possible time for Nigeria, because coming to this crisis, I mean, we've had two bouts of crude oil price declines in the last 20 years or so. And both cycles, 2009 global financial crisis, as well as the 2014-2016 cycles. The first episode, what we saw was Nigeria went into the crisis with large crude oil buffer, with large reserve buffers. We had fiscal savings of over $20 billion. So we could ride out that storm. But in 2014-2016, we went into that crisis with much lower fiscal buffers. Coming into this year, we have pretty much non-existent fiscal buffers. And that's why you've seen the response from Nigerian policymakers has been to adopt things that they never thought they would do. I mean, going to the IMF, all kinds of policy pronouncements are coming in that we never thought Nigerian policymakers would entertain. We're starting to see a lot of those. And that's just because we're coming to this crisis with very low buffers. And for our currency, we relied extensively on portfolio flow, sort of support FX reserves. And so what that means is that, I mean, although the federal government has tapped into an IMF facility for $3.4 billion, they're still a bit careful about how they sort of use that sort of stabilize the currency. And so what you're seeing is that although that should have boosted or made it put away fears around currency, you still see the Naira trading weaker at other segments of the FX market. I think over the rest of the year, that pattern is going to remain intact, just because fundamentally Nigeria's FX reserves, 90% of our FX reserves is driven by crude oil. Crude oil prices where they are, our oil inflows are much thinner than where they historically ever will be. And so what that means is that we need to be careful of how we need to ration how we sell dollars or how we sort of mine them. So because we're going to have to ration it, and demand is unlikely going to fall as fast as we've seen in terms of the collapse we've seen in crude oil prices, that just means that the CBN will have to ration. Of course, under rationing, it just means that you may have to pay more for dollars for some segments that they feel are not priority. And so those segments will have to go to other segments, more likely the parallel market, to try and get their dollar needs met. And so we expect to see the Naira trade much weaker. I mean, the pressure will most likely remain over most of the year. In terms of a number, I try not to always give a number because you have a central bank that can follow an orthodox approach to doing things and so. And then, of course, because the market is segmented, I mean, trying to put a number on which segment of the market, but I think most consensus views just generally agree that, I mean, Naira above 400, probably around 400, 410, 415, probably is fairly valued from what economists refer to as a real effective exchange rate, real terms, in real terms. So I think probably that's probably where people say fair value. Whether it will get there is a different, whether the official rate will move there is a different question entirely. But we've seen other segments of the market move towards that region. And I think the sense you get is that if you see the more market-driven segments of the foreign exchange market around those levels, you find more people willing to bring in dollars into the fund. For fiscal policy this year, I think what we've seen is the budget, the revised budget, which the budget of 10 trillion, which we came into the year, has pretty much remained unchanged. We still have a 10 trillion naira budget, pretty much, I mean, post revisions. However, the government had to make adjustments to revenue assumptions that are in that budget. So coming to this year, they assumed they're going to make, the deficits, that's revenues less expenses, would be, the number will probably be 1.6 trillion naira number. With the revisions we've seen, the deficit we're looking at is a much larger number, around 5 trillion naira. Some people would argue that that number is a bit still optimistic because some of the assumptions that underpin revenues on the non-oil side appear a bit optimistic. You may say that because of the lockdowns where businesses are likely to sell as much as they sold, cost pressures are companies with the devaluation, cost pressures for most companies are going to rise. And so generally, companies are not going to be as profitable as they are. They're not as profitable as they are. Then of course, taxes, the potential taxes that you could tax off their profits is much lower than it would be. And so that just means non-oil revenues will most likely miss a lot of the assumptions that have been baked into it for the 2020 budget. So in 5 trillion for now, that's the finance actual for borrowings. And so I think the biggest thing from a fiscal side is that Nigeria will have to borrow a lot heavily this year, most likely borrow more than any other year this year. I mean, both on the external side, the domestic side, we're going to see borrowings as well for just because we have chosen to maintain our budget at 10 trillion. I mean, some people will say, I mean, you should cut your coat according to your size, but in a crisis such as the COVID, this is not the time to be belt tightening. Now is the time for governments. I mean, as we've seen globally, governments are having to sort of do more to sort of support businesses and the economies. I think also for Nigeria. But more importantly for Nigeria, perhaps now is the time also to engage in more reforms that empower the private sector, more reforms that allow the private sector to expand and become a big influence in the economy, as against what we've seen in recent years. For monetary policy, globally, as I said earlier, Nigeria has no cut interest rates. I suspect more likely what we see is that interest rates will have to come down at some point. I mean, central bank will more likely look to adjust the policy rates. More support, I think, would also come in. They've announced all kinds of intervention measures, stimulus measures. It's just in line with what you're seeing globally. I think the pattern for this year is that monetary policy will be largely supportive. However, Nigeria cannot necessarily afford to keep interest rates low for a long time, given the amount of liquidity we have in the system. I mean, just because it has implications for your exchange rate. And if you still want to manage your exchange rate to an extent, allowing that much liquidity at low rates always sort of causes concerns at some point along the line. Long and short, I think for this year, I think interest rates, we should be ready to allow to swallow negative real yields for most part of the year, just because the central bank is going to try and support the government as much as possible. And what I just tried to show you was just the last two cycles we've had rates coming down. Again, the first one was long-lived, the second one was short-lived, just because it always has implications for the exchange rate at some point. For equity markets, I think in a year, every year you have big crude oil price declines, you always see that correlation. Nigerian equities are strongly correlated with crude oil prices. So in years where you have crude oil price declines, you would also tend to see equity markets sort of sell off. And I think this year already, we're already down 10%. I mean, we've seen a bit of recovery. At some point in March, we're down over 20%. We've seen a bit of recovery over the last 2 months, primarily driven by local liquidity, just because you have, again, I said earlier, central bank there's a lot of local liquidity coming from non-bank financial institutions who have been cut off purchasing formal treasury bills. And so most of them are having sort of tried to find where to sort of put that money in. Some of that has gone into bonds, money markets. Some of that has also found its way into equity. So this will just sort of try to distort asset prices. View generally is this will distort asset prices over 2020, pending when the government borrows up all that liquidity. Part of the government plan is to borrow heavily on the local side, and the reason which is driving that is the government knows there's quite a lot of liquidity available on the local side. So they'll try and get that. And I think just the key takeaway I would say for equities this year is more likely a subdued market. If you're looking from a long-term perspective, maybe yes, now it's time to say maybe pick names you see cheaply. But are you looking for a quick return? Probably not. I mean, the economic crisis we're facing this year means that a lot of companies are going to struggle this year. So fundamentally, companies are likely going to report weaker earnings over the rest of the year. So maybe some people would argue that from a fundamental perspective, now probably is not the time to jump into equities. I think just to summarize everything I've been trying to say, I hope I didn't confuse you. COVID-19 presents an extraordinary disruption to human activity, and the pandemic is going to drive unconventional policies from policymakers across advanced and developing economies. Unlike in the 2008 financial crisis, when companies resorted to austerity, what you're going to see is a lot of companies are going to pretty much adopt a humane response to. Countries are going to adopt a human approach to policy making, and it's going to ensure that countries are going to do all they can to sort of support businesses, support livelihoods. And so you're going to see essentially a lot of quantitative easing type policies, government, central banks printing money, trying to do their best, borrowing above deficit limits or borrowing limits that they previously had, just because these are unusual times. For oil prices, I think this year the big thing is for oil prices, they're going to remain subdued just because we've had a drop-off in crude oil demand, primarily because people aren't going to spend as much on crude. People aren't going to travel as much. A lot of companies are offline. So energy consumption this year is going to be much lower than we've had in historic times. For Nigeria, we have a very large budget financing requirement. To plug that deficit, the government will have to do a lot of borrowings. Central bank would also like to support that because they won't want to ensure that the government borrows too expensively. So they will try and ensure on the local side interest rates are low to support that. Interest are also low to try and support businesses as well during these difficult times. The exchange rate outlook generally biased towards the downside because central bank will have to manage its reserves during this period. Excess liquidity, I think, will distort asset prices across. And, that's just all. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Wale. My God, I don't know whether to say that was a lot of gloom and doom, but interesting presentation. I picked a few things from your final summary, just for those who are tuned in. Human policy response, interesting. So the world is going to be a lot more humane in terms of their policy response. And then as a lot of central banks are going to be printing money. The US already printed about, they don't like to use that word printing, but they've already done about $3 trillion. And the US House just submitted another bill for another $3 trillion. Where are they getting this money from? Of course, somebody's printing somewhere. And then higher debt for Nigeria. Oh, wow, higher debt for Nigeria. A lot of us are already crying that our debt service to GDP ratio is at, to revenue ratio rather, is at over 50%, all-time highs. But it looks as if we can't escape this quagmire. So there's always going to be more debt. It looks like we're going to be hooked to this debt binge. And then manage float system. Guys, Wale just made it sound really sexy. Manage float system. I think he's going to have a chance to explain what he means by manage exchange rate float system. Okay, so for those of you who are worried about the exchange rate and want to know what it might look like in the coming months, then I think Wale, I'm going to hold Wale on to that. So don't worry, I'll ask him that question. He's going to answer a lot of exchange rate questions. And then there was something he said about the automobiles, liquidating. So the liquidity in the 𝗹𝗶𝗳𝗲s or the excess liquidity or the 𝗹𝗶𝗳𝗲s that are liquidating are probably going to find its way into other asset classes. And that would sort of distort prices. You know, economists like to use these very sexy, fanciful words. But basically, what he's saying is that asset prices might go up or maybe might go down. So there might be some volatility. You might see equities, that's shares, prices start to go up, or maybe you might see investment in agri-tech or several other investment outlets that start to go up because there's a lot of excess liquidity now in the system. So, but I'm going to be asking Wale this question so that it's not like I'm putting words in his mouth. He'll explain himself what he means. So that's the first presentation. The next presentation is from the one and only 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗡𝗵𝗄. So I'm going to yield for Cheta. Is Cheta ready now? So let's have his slide up so that Cheta can give us insights into the Nigerian economy from a political and a risk perspective. Over to you, Cheta.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Wale has done a great job of going through what is happening. So I don't think I'll dwell too much on that. However, it's important to just give a very brief summary of the first third of 2020, since we're in the middle of May already. It's not just talking about Q1, but now at the time of Black Swan events, we all saw the COVID-19. The COVID-19 is what is pretty much on everybody's mind now.
Sorry, Cheta, could you expand your slide if you can? Thank you.
I'm trying to find the button for that. Better
So
now?
I think if you go to top right, yeah, under present, I think that's where you find it. Just click view. Click view.
I'm not using PowerPoints directly. Yeah, so I'm on full screen. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on. Yeah, so basically the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been on everybody's mind now.
Sorry, Cheta, view and then present. You have to click on present. View and then present. Sorry about that. I'm not sure it's showing yet. View and then present. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
I think you might have to scroll up again. On your top left.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let me just go on, please, if you don't mind.
All right, go on then.
So, an economic recession is looming for everybody, pretty much. Nigeria is not left out of it, and inflation, which is something that we should always watch in this country, it's a worry. It's rising, and there's a possibility in terms of social unrest, because widespread hunger is leading to mob action in some urban centers. Now, Nigeria's COVID curve is now in a world of its own. When the index case of the disease came here, our initial curve was very similar to India's. But as time went on, the Indians have ramped up testing, Nigeria has not. So we still have a deceptively low number of cases. However, the economic effect is still there, whether the cases are low or not. And it shows in states preparedness. This chart is very important, the preparedness of Nigeria's states. Basically, this chart was derived by taking certain factors into consideration: doctor to population ratio, human development index, infant mortality, per capita budgets, percentage of budget spent on health. That's a very important thing which many people don't look at in this country. And you'll find that the best prepared Nigerian states is supposed to be Cross River, which is not even up to 60% ready for anything. Basically, Nigeria on a state level is not ready to handle the effects of the pandemic. And this showed, for example, in the Lassa fever epidemic. We had an epidemic of Lassa fever at the beginning of the year, which is tapering out. The Lassa fever epidemic is currently in week 18. But based on NCDC data, the 2020 Lassa outbreak is the worst in the last 5 years. There's a possibility that the COVID-19 preparations affected the response to Lassa fever. And from the NCDC data, we see that the peak of the Lassa outbreak started at about the same time we had the index case for COVID-19 in Nigeria. What this tells us is that we are not very flexible enough to deal with multiple incidents, multiple outbreaks of various diseases at the same time. That's something that Nigerians will need to keep in mind. Unfortunately, the various conflicts that have been happening in the country are still happening. In Q1, you had 452 deaths at least in the Northwest. You had 162 in the Northeast. Basically, we are still hearing of incidents of violence, kidnapping in various parts of the country. On the chart that you are looking at, the left of your chart is cumulative kidnap incidents and fatalities during kidnap incidents. Bear in mind, this is just incidents that were kidnapped alone over the last 10 years. This data is for the last 10 years. And we have an unreasonably high amount of these incidents in the country. It tells you a lot about the security situation in the country. And one thing that you should keep in mind is that when you have a bad security situation, business falters. I won't dwell on inflation here because Wale has talked about it, but basically looking at the economic indicators, we have a depressing trend. Inflation is up, interest rates are down, capital importation is down, public debt is up, exchange rate is down, external reserves down. So one thing that all of these things boils down to is the data that you are seeing is 3 years data for federal allocation, what the states share at every federal allocation committee meeting. And what immediately jumps out is the fact that on the average, it's getting smaller. Now, there's a deception that we had a higher share in March of 2020. But what people need to bear in mind is that these figures that you're looking at are Naira figures. And there was a devaluation in between February and March. So the March figures, because of that devaluation, the March figures appear to be higher. But if you convert everything to USD at the prevailing rates of such sharing, you'll find that the money is actually getting smaller consistently. This again has implications in terms of social unrest, security, and the larger economy. States don't have as much money. It means that some states will just go straight up and owe staff. Some states will downsize. But bottom line is that the unemployment market is going to get much larger. The IMF forecast is steep recession and slow recovery. Nigeria's growth rate has been downgraded minus 3.5 percentage points. That is far worse than the global crisis of 2008 and far worse than the recession of 2016 in Nigeria. Consumer spending, inflation, these things again always have implications on social unrest. So to your left on this chart, you'll see that that Nigerians spend majority of their income on food in terms of consumer spending. 56.7% spent on feeding. It's only going to get worse as people begin to get more constraints for cash. The chart on your right shows for various income ranges what they spend. And it is clear very quickly that people who earn lower spend more of their money on food. That's a problem that Nigeria will need to figure out how to sort out, because the more you spend on food, the less you have to spend on other things that can help to boost the economy. Unfortunately, in terms of attitude, it's actually beginning to show. So SBM Intelligence conducted a survey very recently, 600 people by phone, to find out how they feel about things that are happening. And 66% of our respondents felt that the FG's handling of the coronavirus outbreak has been poor. Now, when people are not upbeat, when people are despondent, when people are pessimistic, it has a way of translating into every other thing. Their spending patterns begin to change, because things like hoarding become more prevalent. So there are more people who are confident that the private sector has handled it well. Only 24% of our respondents say that the private sector has handled it poorly. This shows the direction that Nigeria ought to take as a country. We need to unshackle the private sector. It's a matter of national survival. The government cannot do everything. The government cannot do anything, to be honest. I think the records are very clear. The Nigerian government has a way of messing things up when it gets too involved. So comparing side by side, 600 people, you find that more people are clearly confident in what the private sector has done thus far. Another question that we asked, and I think this is very important, is what do people feel of the state of things outside the oil economy? And 51% of respondents said it's bad. Only 11% of respondents said that outside of the oil economy is good in Nigeria. That's very important, because the first problem that we have is everybody always says Nigeria needs to diversify its economy. No, Nigeria's economy is already diversified. The problem is our foreign exchange and our government revenues are not diversified. One of the things that the government will need to do, I don't know how they are going to go about doing that within this short time, but they need to formalize the economy. Too many of our people are outside of the formal economy. Now, in terms of scenario modeling, there are certain industries that are very highly exposed to the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you find that the automotive industry, banking and finance, construction, entertainment, leisure, travel, luxury goods, oil and gas, trading, transportation are highly exposed. All of them are going to see serious contractions. Now, the problem is that these are all very high employers of labor in Nigeria. All of these industries, with the exception of oil and gas that doesn't employ a very high proportion of people. I mean, we all saw what's happened with certain banks recently that the CBN had to step in. The banking industry is going to be heavily exposed. As we are, I'm not very sure that there's much construction going on. So we need to have ideas. We need to have serious actions, not to use the social media expression, not audio actions, but serious actions to mitigate the effects of this on the economy of the country. Now, finally, we are looking at basically the best case scenario and the worst case scenario for us. It's important for us to look at all of these things and project where we may be going. So best case scenario, which is the lowest probability, quite unfortunately, is if the world somehow gets a vaccine against COVID-19 within the next 3 to 6 months. Now, if that happens, we will be able to walk, we'll be able to achieve herd immunity, which people talk about. We'll be able to return to work, and then possibly the demand for oil will go up. GDP may remain positive. However, what is more likely is that we are going to get a vaccine somewhere within the next year, which means that there will be various forms of partial lockdown. So, for example, the Ogun State government has extended by 1 week the lockdown within the states. This is the new reality. More people are going to start working from home. Fewer people are going to find outside jobs, and we're going to see a GDP contraction. With the GDP contraction, internally generated revenues in various states will fall, and this will have an effect. Now, another key thing is diaspora remittances. Diaspora remittances are definitely going to fall because the global economy has been deeply affected by COVID-19. Now, outside of oil revenue, diaspora remittances are the biggest source of revenue for the country. So what we're looking at is a huge revenue gap. And it's important to keep in mind, a revenue gap leads to real life actions, such as job losses, such as unpaid salaries. This leads to consumption cuts, which in turn affect the informal economy, and this leads to social unrest. So what we need to do, what we need to find a way to do, is to break that chain. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you very much, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I don't know which one is worse, whether it was your own gloom and doom or that of Wale. But just to summarize and for those who have logged in, you know, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 has made very interesting remarks here. The first one that points to me is good news is hard to find anywhere, not just in this country, in the world. Unfortunately, in our own side of the world, there's a lot of violence. In addition to that good news, another important thing 𝗧𝗵𝗲 mentioned here was FAC. FAC, by the way, is the amount that the government shares to states in the country, and it's been down in Q1. However, even though we saw that it increased, there's somebody's news. Yeah, so even though it dropped in March, so even though it increased in March, rather, said it was because of devaluation happened in March. Let's all remember that the government devalued its exchange rate from 305 to 360. Interesting thing he also said was that we should be expecting a worse recession than in 2016. Oh my God, I am going to put him on the spot on that. He has to explain to us how we can manage ourselves out of that recession. He's not to come and tell us that it's going to be a worse recession. What should we be doing, right, so that we don't get the wrong end of the stick? And then he also says spending is not helping as well, and that's because a lot of people are going to rely on food. And when there's a lot of people relying on food, then that can impact on inflation. A huge chunk of our inflation rate rise is due to food inflation. And then he also said that you know, they did a poll, an interesting poll that suggests Nigerians are not happy with the way the government has handled the COVID-19 outbreak. What do you think? Are you happy? Are you unhappy? I would also ask 𝗧𝗵𝗲 as well, what does he think as well, and what could the government have done better? And then finally, one other slide that kind of caught my attention was the scenario. Very interesting slide. And one aspect of that slide that got chills down my spine was diaspora remittances. Nigerians rely a lot on our brothers and sisters and friends and family abroad, you know, to send money down to us so that we can keep up, you know, with the pressures. And he's thinking, even in his best scenario, it's probably going to be down 10%. So he's going to be probably explaining that as well. And thank God we have 𝗧𝗵𝗲 as well. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 probably has family down here too. So we're going to be asking him, you know, are you going to be seeing a cut in diaspora remittances, you know, to Nigerians, or is this all just basically, you know, fear mongering? After all, there's been bailouts in the West. So in the US, people are getting $5,000 paychecks. So is that money going to find its way down here? Who knows? So these are all the questions I'm going to be asking. So it's been an interesting session so far. My God, my guys are telling me that we're about 10 minutes behind schedule. We'll try as much as possible to close this on time. So I'm going to move on now to the panelist discussion. We've been waiting for this, and this is where we get to hear our panelists delve into some of the issues that has been brought here. I have loads of questions myself that I want to ask them. We're also going to be taking questions from you know, from all the participants as well. You're going to be taking your questions too. Might not be able to take everyone's question, but we'll take your questions, and we'll try as much as possible to answer those that we can answer, especially the ones that cut across a lot more people. So, as they usually say, ladies first. So I'm going to be starting with Dr. Ola. But before I take, you know, I ask her, you know, a very important question that I penciled down here. I think Dr. Ola has just a very short presentation to share, and then the talking points will start. So over to you, Dr. Ola. So can the admin switch her on, and let's have her slides on. Thank you.
It wasn't really a short presentation. It was just a way that sort of I could illustrate some of my answers to the questions, because I know that some people on this call didn't study economics necessarily and didn't study medicine. I studied both, so I think that gives me a kind of unique perspective on the situation, both from the medical side and from the economic and finance side. So I just have 2 slides, which I'll very quickly go through, and which hopefully you can follow with the illustration on the healthcare side and the economic side. So the healthcare side is pretty easy. The virus actually doesn't move unless people move. People have found viruses like frozen in Antarctica that have been there for like thousands of years. They can't do anything. They're just there like frozen. They can't actually live unless they have humans to, take advantage of. So there was an epidemiologist in America that said that if everybody could just stay away from each other for 2 weeks, we'd actually solve this whole matter. The matter is exacerbated because, we just can't stay away from each other. I think the first point is that the virus doesn't move unless people do. And that's a really important point to make. The virus doesn't move unless people do. And we all know how it happened. I mean, it all happened with what they say anyway. Somebody ate some bat soup in Wuhan, and the virus jumped into humans for the first time. And, we ended up with the situation that we have now with mass casualties, children getting Kawasaki-like disease, people having long-term effects from being on respirators. And there's a lot of policy decisions that have to be made about how we manage it, and different countries are managing it in different ways. And there's sort of 5 main policy decisions that, or 5 main factors that really affect policy decisions. The first one is, how close are we to a vaccine or a cure? If we feel that we're very close to a vaccine or a cure, then we can start making short-term or more short-term decisions. If we think that's further away, then we have to make longer-term decisions and sort of plan to live our lives a bit differently for a longer period of time. People are also making decisions on their healthcare infrastructure, and I think that that's something that perhaps people haven't taken into much consideration. So I was speaking at an event the other day, and somebody said, Nigeria should just do what Sweden did. Sweden hasn't locked down, actually. People are more or less going about their normal lives in Sweden. But one key factor, one key difference between Nigeria and Sweden, despite the population, is the healthcare infrastructure. There's a medical conference, emergency and intensive care conference, that I go to every year that the Nordics present at, and I'm always amazed at how advanced their intensive care situation is. In fact, they were one of the first. They have some of the highest cardiac arrest survival rates in the world. So even when your heart stops, you're more likely to survive in Sweden than anywhere else. And I said it in one of my articles that even if you're destined to die in Sweden, even if your enemies have condemned you to die, if it happens in Sweden, if they attack you and get you in Sweden, Swedish doctors will still make it, and the Swedish healthcare will still make it very, very difficult for them to actually finally finish you off. Because they even have developed a technique where they kind of like freeze you, cool you down, and then gradually warm you up and bring you back. Like it's in Nigeria, where we have already have some of the highest death rates for women in childbirth, some of the highest death rates for children. More children die here than almost anywhere in the world on a normal day, without any Kawasaki disease, without any issues. The patient-doctor ratios, for example, in Europe are about 40 to every 10,000 people, whereas in Nigeria, they're closer to 4 to every 10,000 people. The spending, I mean, the UK spends about $200 billion on healthcare. So the healthcare infrastructure is very strong. We spend, federal budget is about $1 billion. So basically what they spend in the UK for a year can take us for 200 years. So that's another key decision that we have to think about. Poverty levels, I mean, the other speakers have spoken about this. We have more poor people here than anywhere else in the world. So if you look at India, for example, a lot of people compare us to India, that India is doing well, so Nigeria should do well as well. But actually, India has a lot more rich people, and India has fewer poor people than Nigeria. So that's something that we have to consider as well, our extreme poverty. And then how many people are your country actually comfortable with dying? So in Sweden, I think they made a decision pretty early that they were comfortable with quite a few people dying, and they made that policy decision and they made it very clear. So they've had much higher death rates than their peers. And I think the people in Sweden kind of have made a trade-off between sort of freedom, economic freedom, and death. And I think they've been quite comfortable with that. There haven't been protests, there hasn't been any uproar. So you also have to consider when you're making policy decisions, how comfortable are your people with death? How comfortable are your people with people dying? And then the fiscal health, how can you stimulate your economy? What financial strength do you have to stimulate your economy as well? So I think the key point in that slide was the virus doesn't move unless people move. But on the economic side, which is, I think slightly more complex, you can see on the economic side that there's a lot of things happening in Nigeria, because the opposite situation is happening on the economic side. Remember, on the healthcare side, I said the virus doesn't move unless people do. But on the side of the economy and business, when people move, their ideas actually move with them. And ideas are really the currency of business, and business is the currency of the economy. So unless people move, then you're not going to get this business. And in Nigeria, events have all been cancelled, meetings didn't happen, deals didn't sign, event companies are going bankrupt, event companies are laying off staff, and this is all reducing consumption and growth. And if you think about the events value chain in Nigeria, it's the cocktail makers, it's the people that dance outside, it's the people that change money, it's the people that sell the 𝗍𝗵𝗲, it's the people that rent out the event centers. All these people don't have any money, and when they don't have any money, they're not buying anything. So this is the economic contagion that you're seeing in Nigeria, where consumption is going down. And don't forget that GDP is consumption plus investment plus exports plus government spending. And you can see that this affects consumption directly. The retail shops are closed. Malls are closed, they're not selling. So the retailers have started already defaulting on their loans. And then the whole value chain around tourism, the airlines, the hotels, the demand for petrol goes down because nobody's going anywhere. All of these industries are also defaulting on their loans. And you can see the effects already in the financial sector. We're looking at a mass bank default. Banks can, and when people aren't paying back their loans, they don't have any money to lend. And the policies of last year, where they were squeezed into lending with that high LDR ratio, that high CRR, that high liquidity ratio, remember, they were pushing banks to lend. So those banks were already squeezed. And they started lending to people with a higher risk profile, slightly unreliable people, because they said, at the end of the day, it will fund consumption. Those people, a lot of them were not spending on business. They were just spending on marrying a new wife or whatever. But to meet up with what CBN said, they decided to lend to them anyway. All those people are definitely going to default. And that also reduces consumption, because when the banks aren't lending, it reduces consumption. So this key part of GDP is all the money that Nigeria makes. This one is already finished. So when you talk about investment, when banks start failing because they've become financially unstable, because they don't have any money, because everybody has defaulted on their loans, normally the banks look to the central banks for bailouts. And in America, they just print money and give them and everything goes back to normal. But when your accounts, even at your central bank, are not as strong as the American central bank, then you really can't help the poor part of them. So at the end of the day, there may even be some bank failures, because I just don't see a situation where we're going to have bank bailouts in Nigeria unless somebody buys out the bank. I'm not sure that we're going to have bailouts in Nigeria. Government side, decreased government spending because they're not getting any taxes, because we're spending a lot of our forex on maintaining our exchange rate, so the exchange rate doesn't go down. We have decreased revenue, puts the government into a difficult situation. Remember, the events companies are no longer paying tax. The retail companies are no longer paying tax. All these people, the airlines, hotels, all these people that normally pay tax are not paying tax because they're not making any money. So this causes decreased government revenue. So I think I've given a summary. I wanted to give it in actual response to the question, but I've just started off the panel session about the economic contagion and the tension between the fact that, if we all stay locked down and we all stay away from each other, then we solve the problem of pandemic. But at the same time, the economic contagion, the fact that when people move, their ideas move with them, and you have to keep people moving, because if you don't keep people moving, none of this stuff actually happens. And then we all get poor and we all go bankrupt and we all go hungry. So that tension between the economics and the finance, the economics and the healthcare, economics and medicine is really probably the focus of our panel discussion today. So with that, I will hand over back to Ugo to start his interrogation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ola. I like the way you kind of like, segued into what exactly this whole discussion is about. So for those who are just tuning in, this is the new normal, Nairametrics second quarter outlook. We aptly titled this the new normal, your money or your life. And Dr. Ola has basically just put it out there. I mean, you've got to be apart for this virus to die. But at the same time, humanity has got to move around for us to be able to also squash on this virus and then ensure that humanity wins, as we'll always win. So that's basically what this is about. And now we're going to go right into the panel discussion. And I'm going to bring on 𝗧𝗵𝗲 now. I think I'm going to ask 𝗧𝗵𝗲 at the first one because now that everyone has basically, put things out there, I'm going to ask 𝗧𝗵𝗲, if you're on, you can just switch on your camera so that our participants can see you. So my first question, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, are you there? You want to switch on your camera right now?
No,
right.
It was, yeah, I think
right.
my camera was disabled from your end. Okay.
Oh, please, can you please,
okay, it's done now.
Great.
Yeah.
So you've heard everyone, basically, at least 𝗬𝗵𝗲 and Dr. Ola Brown, lay out the marker out there. But let me just ask you, from somebody who is well vested in Nigeria's, policies and politics and how we basically take decisions that affect lives. What, decisions over the last 4 or 5 years, has the government taken that you would say, or maybe decisions that the government had not taken that may have prepared us better for what we're facing now? Because it appears that even though, our cases, I think we are still about 5,000. It's not anywhere close to the likes of the US, where you have over 1 million. But it appears on the economic side, we're probably going to be worse off. So what, do you think the government has done wrong? And what could they have done better to prepare us for things like this?
Okay, I mean, I think that's hindsight is a wonderful thing. Everyone has it. But I think the thing that most people have been banging on about over the last few years is this over focus on the currency. So basically, the almost crazy focus on the top line exchange rate. What is the exchange rate? I mean, rather than viewing it as a price, it's the price of something that can move up and down depending on what is happening. But there's been a strong focus on having a single exchange rate, is a fixed rate, and I think most Nigerians have not really come to terms with how much it has cost to have pretty much the exchange rate at 360 to 1 since 2017 February. So I mean, over 3 years, basically a lot has gone into that. We've been shouting about. Unfortunately, the CBN has a kind of upper hand because it is an extremely complicated thing to explain to people. When we keep talking about OMO, that how much basically the CBN is doing to attract foreign investor flows, whereby giving them a deal that they cannot refuse and paying a huge amount of money. So I think all of these things have exposed Nigeria. Is that famous thing about, when the tide goes out, you see who has been swimming naked. So obviously no one could have predicted a pandemic. I mean, even in January or February, no one thought we'll be here where we are. So to an extent, this is kind of like the proverbial worst case scenario that has finally happened. But then again, we find out that some people have been better prepared than others. Some countries that didn't look too good a few months ago are now looking good. I mean, you can take for a random example, Australia. They had the fires earlier this year, and everyone was, was up against the Australian government that, they messed up the reaction to the Australian wildfires. And, the government was shaking, they were on shaky ground because, they only got elected recently. And then now, a few months later, look at their response to the pandemic, top of the range. They're in the top they're the top half of the league of the best response to, so some people look good. So I mean, in that scenario, I wouldn't want to be too hard on Nigeria. No one could have really seen this coming. But, there are things that Nigeria has done that has left badly exposed to a kind of one-off event like this, that, slavish focus on the exchange rate, on doing anything just to keep the exchange rate at a certain amount. It's crazy. We've paid a lot. Now, the CBN has no firepower. There's no, the balance sheet has been ruined, in the name of, just this whole, we must keep the dollar at the exchange. And then, more and more things. I mean, there's something they call the Goodhart's law, whereby you turn something into, something is a useful measure, so it's a measure, you use something to measure something, and it's okay. But then the moment you now then elevate that measure to a target, it becomes useless. So, an exchange rate in a normal time is something that every country has. An exchange rate is, every country has an exchange rate to the dollar or whatever, but when you then raise that exchange rate to the be all and end all, then the exchange rate stops telling you anything useful. So over the last 3 years, Nigeria has, in the past, maybe the exchange rate, you could have said, oh, okay, it gives us a good idea of what is going on. But then the moment that 360 to 1 became the top line measure and everything, it became useless, because over the last few months, 360 to 1 did not tell you anything. It was an artificial rate, because it then became the focus of everything. So, this has left Nigeria badly exposed. And, like Wale said earlier, maybe the upside of it is that, all of a sudden, the most socialist government in Nigeria is now contemplating, all kinds of crazy things that would not have been possible, So, not just removing fuel subsidy, they're actually thinking about putting a tax on it. I support that, because if you put a tax on petrol, then it gives you wiggle room in the future, whereby if oil prices go up, at least before you start bringing in subsidy, you can at least remove the tax, and give yourself wiggle room. So we're looking at things like that, and then we're actually looking at the budget that they passed with so much fanfare only a few months ago. Now they're looking at the option of cutting it. Again, this has all been a fiction that the government has been doing, whereby we all know that, look, this budget is not real. It's just a balancing act, just to make things, So maybe now they are now looking at a lot of things are now, we can now have a honest conversation. Now they now say they've missed this month, but they now say they'll be repricing petrol on a monthly basis. Again, I've always argued that a lot of things about the economy are psychological. You need to get Nigerians to get used to the idea of prices moving up and down. It's not the end of the world. It happens everywhere. I buy diesel here regularly. The price I paid last week is not going to be the price I'll pay next week. It moves marginally, but you need to get Nigerians to get used to that idea that, okay, just because the petrol price was 140 last month, this month it might be lower, it might be higher. As long as it's not crazy movements whereby it was 140 last month, then 70 this month, people will get round to the idea of, small, they live with it already in their own daily lives. People go to the supermarket, the prices change, they adjust their budgets accordingly, and we all live with that kind of change. So again, that would be a good thing. So maybe subsidy going, adding even some small tax to petrol, and then going away from this business of fixed prices on the exchange rate, fixed prices on petrol. So I think to round up and to come back to your question, we exposed ourselves by turning what is just a normal price. An exchange rate is just something that moves up and down, but by turning into the focus of target to be the focus and the number one metric by which we almost pretty much judge the whole economy, we've paid a heavy price, and we've put too much into keeping that exchange rate, which has now left us exposed and not have the firepower to be able to respond to the proverbial worst case scenario that has now finally happened.
Fantastic, Faye. But I've got one question for you, to follow up for you. I know that you're one person that has spoken negatively about the CBN's foreign exchange rate policy, and I think that's very well documented. But there was somebody who asked me once and said, look, we keep talking about exchange rate, as if it's one silver bullet. Look across, there's Ghana just by the side here, that they have a floating exchange rate currency. What has this done for them? Has this in any way made their economy better than Nigeria. That's speaking to the indices, and then they prepare them better for COVID-19 or anything else that we could have found ourselves in. So how do you respond to questions like that?
Okay, I think this all comes back again to the point whereby we've now elevated the exchange rate to something to seriously. It's just one step in a series of steps. So if we have the exchange rate as we come to accept it as something that moves up and down, we can then move on to other things and then manage our economic response in other areas better, differently. But when you have the exchange rate at a fixed point, people plan on the basis of that, and it then has ripple effects, knock-on effects, whereby people will be taking risks that they shouldn't really be taking. If exchange rate is 360 to 1, people start planning all kinds of things that maybe businesses that actually really shouldn't be viable, or things that you shouldn't really be investing money on. Again, the amount of investment in the economy, if we take it as something that is probably maybe fixed, if you are investing in one area, by extension, you are depriving another area of investment. The exchange rate has an effect on that, because if everyone knows that the government is going to do everything possible to maintain that exchange rate, then their risk appetite for certain things goes up, and we maybe don't want that, because we know how these things happen. We hold the exchange rate for years, and then it gets a sharp drop, and then everything resets again. Whereas you should have, minor adjustments, minor resets to avoid the whole idea of a bigger. So the exchange rate was never a silver bullet, but because of the nature of the way we've shaped our economic policy, we have elevated it, again, going back to a good hard law, which I said, we have elevated it into what we measure everything else. We take our exchange rate as a source of pride, as the thing that determines how well the economy is doing. I tell people, go to Vietnam. When I was in Vietnam a couple of years ago, and when I changed money, I was like, what is this? I changed maybe 100 or 200 pounds, and they gave me 2 million dong or something. You enter a taxi and it's 100,000 dong. So in fact, after a while, I got so confused with the currency. But the economy is doing well. You can't say that. They are growing. These guys were poorer than Nigeria in the 1980s. They are now richer, and they are now ahead of Nigeria. They have strong industry. So if we have, unfortunately, something that we should have just seen as just a normal price, like any other price, we've now elevated it, and now it's now stopping. It's now become magic, and we've linked too many things to it. So it's never an exchange rate is never a silver bullet. It's just one of several things that we should do to get to the level of the kind of economy that we want to be.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to come to you next, but before that, interesting thing was that this morning I was having a discussion with my wife about exchange, and she was explaining how in the travel industry sometimes you have maybe oil companies paying in dollars, and then you're supposed to remit to the airline. Maybe if you're a travel agent or something in dollars, but you convert to Naira and then pay them Naira, and then the airline has to convert again to Naira, and you're doing all that just because of what Faye has basically described here, that exchange rate issue. Once you have exchange rate as the all in all, people leave business and start to run exchange rate businesses rather than focus on growing your business. And when you're into an exchange business, at the end of the day, the margin you get from round tripping, it's probably more than what you'd ever make from your business. But at the end of the day, you're actually not creating any exponential growth for the economy. You're not producing anything. So that's basically what Faye is saying here for those who are trying to discern better. But Wale, I'm going to come to you next. There's a question here that I think that is straight. It's putting you on the spot, but it's straight on. I think people just want to know this. And the interesting thing is that I don't know why people like to ask this kind of question, like we are some kind of God. But I don't know, maybe you got answers. So the question here is, Wale, will there be another round of devaluation from the CBN? Straight up. You've got to unmute. Please unmute Wale so that we can hear him.
So yes, so I think with the way the oil prices, and just even looking at where our reserves are, I think it's pretty much like where we were in 2016, where we had first round of devaluations, and then we also had follow-ons, because if should the central bank try to meet the backlog of demand that currently exists in the system, then almost all the IMF money will be gone immediately. So what they always try to do is, and then of course, because we still have a multiple exchange rate system, and because implicitly we're also still, as you say, we are still obsessed with keeping a peg, or we still have a policy of a peg. You know, it's still something that we still always have in there, somewhere there. It's always to try and just keep it within our reach. It just means that you have demand move to other segments, and until you see the oil price recover to much higher levels, I think you can't rule out further follow-on devaluation. I don't think it's something you can rule out because, I mean, as I said, if we try to just clear the backlog that exists, it means that almost all the IMF money would go back immediately. So central bank isn't going to do that. What they'll try and do is ration it in a manner that, okay, they prioritize critical segments and everybody else will go and sort yourself out. And so because everybody else goes sort themselves out, you find the pressure building across the other segments, the I&E, the parallel market, and you continue to see pressures there. And I think fundamentally, until oil prices recover back to where they are, let's not forget, oil prices have come down by over 50% from where we came into the year at. The Naira has only moved in the official rate by only 14–15%. In other segments, maybe 5%. The parallel market has moved much wider. So if oil price has moved by 55%, 90% of your reserves is crude oil. And it just means that, I mean, a similar magnitude is what you should expect of the exchange rate. I mean, the last time around when we saw big drop in crude oil prices, I mean, eventually we ended up there. We ended up having almost similar magnitude of adjustment to the exchange rate. So I think it's a very high probability that yes, a follow-on devaluation will come.
All right, but Wale, some people usually ask as well, like, look, like this devaluation thing. Okay, so let's even assume that, you know what, they stop devaluation. If they decide to float the currency, what does it mean for them? Like, does it make things better in any way? Is there, I mean, I think, you know, ฎeyi spoke to that a lot earlier, but does it in any way help, you know, businesses if they float the currency? Is it going to help them?
Well, I think the point thing to state is that a devaluation is not a policy that cures anything. No, what it's just saying is that currently you are so obsessed with fixing, as we said, just something that is just there. It's a price. You're so obsessed with keeping that price stable that it causes you to carry out so many other things or undertake several policies that will try and just keep that policy stable, just try and keep that price stable. So the problem with it is that fixing it doesn't solve the underlying problem, because the underlying problem still remains I think the way I would like to explain it is the exchange rate system you pick is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. So the problem is that we've been so obsessed with the means that we're not looking at the end. Yeah, and that's where the problem is. And so until we stop being obsessed with the means, and if you have in a normal environment, if crude oil prices have fallen by 35%, I mean, look at other countries that are oil exporters that don't have as much reserve. I mean, the only way you can keep your exchange rate as stable as you can is if you have the reserve firepower. I mean, Saudi Arabia has crude oil FX reserves over 400, billions of dollars. So they can afford to underwrite their exchange rate. We don't have that level of reserves to be able to underwrite our exchange rate. And so what we only try to do every time we face these shocks to our FX reserves from crude oil prices, we just try and manage it, hope that the problem goes away. No, the problem doesn't go away. Rather, it causes all kinds of problems. So the important thing is that an economic policy should be such that it matches the underlying reality. Whenever you try to distort the underlying reality, you can only do it for a short while. Over time, the reality will realign or reassert itself more strongly. And I think whenever we face an exchange rate shock, you should not try to sort of, I mean, you can try and look for other means to sort of mitigate the impact of the economy, but what we always do every time we face these shocks is that we try to protect a lot, and it ends up causing more damage, or it keeps us trapped in the sense that, I mean, we're better off just biting the bullet and moving on. It's kind of like we're better. I mean, there are other countries, Ghana, for instance, like ฎeyi said. I mean, they've been losing the floating exchange rate for time immemorial. The inflation rate in Ghana today is much lower than it is in Nigeria. even though, I mean, the last 2 to 3 years, their currency has weakened more than the Naira. So I think it's just that it allows you to stop, to move on to other things. People will find a way to hedge themselves. It allows for other things, for other ways for people to manage FX volatility. It allows for the development of systems where people can hedge this risk and treat it. But if you have a policy that the central bank is the chief hedger, or is the chief, everybody hedges the central bank, then it just means, as you said earlier, people doing normal businesses will start speculating on the currency. We'll all be involved in the business of speculating on the currency because, I mean, you always get the sense that oil prices have moved 5%, you have only moved 15%. Clearly, you've mispriced it, and so there's an opportunity there. So I think it's the way we should view it. We shouldn't view it as the end. That once we move to a floating exchange rate system, that's the end of it. You know, I mean, personally, I wouldn't say I'm a floater. What I would say is I believe in allowing exchange rate reflect the underlying reality. I mean, if the underpinning for your exchange rate, foundation of your exchange rate has fallen by 55%, and you're still saying your exchange rate should remain where it is, then you're not being real. So I mean, we've been here before. We've had a policy system that worked previously, but for some reason we just seem to have reverted and just seem focused with a means, right? And that's why we're always going through this cycle every 2-3 years. Now it's going to be bad.
All right. Thanks for that, Wale. I mean, I think you pretty much summarized it. You've explained why. So the exchange rate system is not, floating exchange rate is not a silver bullet, just as Feyi said and Wale just reiterated, but is a step in the right direction so that we can just move our minds out of exchange rate and businesses can focus on what they are good at, which is doing business. So I'm going to switch up a bit into social issues now. So I'm going to go to Cheta. Right now. So Cheta, for me, a lot of the questions that I've gotten from people is, how does the latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics on poverty affect Nigerians' insecurity issues? So you look around you have people, either beggars on the street trying to wash your windscreen. Some people say that we're just one crisis away from a major security issue in Nigeria. You're a businessman, you're trying to own a shop somewhere, you don't know whether there's going to be a riot one day that's just going to come and sweep up all your business. So from a security perspective, from, for local investors in Nigeria and foreign investors, what exactly should they be looking at, and how should they mitigate or protect their investments, especially in an environment where that the government probably won't be there for you? What should they be looking at, and how do they protect themselves? Thank you.
That's 2 questions in one.
Yes.
Let's try and answer the second one first. How should they protect themselves? I mean, I'll be very blunt. Make friends with the area boys around you. If you have a small budget to help the area boys around where your physical location is, you will find that over time, they will take it as their own interests to protect you, to protect your business. So if for example, your people park their cars at the office and they give the young boys around something to help them wash the cars, or they send them to buy food, those little things that it doesn't seem like much to you. It could be 100 naira, 200 naira. It doesn't appear to be much, but to those people, it piles up. It's a lot, and they will be interested in making sure that you are protected, as it were, so that they don't lose that little source of income. Having said that, to face the first question, how do these social issues come up? It's simple and short. If a revenue finance issue, because there isn't much money floating around in the economy in relative terms, we tend to make the mistake of thinking that, oh, we hear a budget of 9 trillion naira and we think, oh, that's a lot of money. It's not. All you have to do is convert it to the standard, as it were, which is the US dollar. You realize that $30 billion, which we've only surpassed that as a budget once. $30 billion is not much, especially for a country that has at least 150 million people. When you look at those things in context, you realize that okay, we have a budget of about $30 billion roughly. We end up sharing most of it. We end up wasting a lot of it. The budget is the same template over and over again. It doesn't appear to change. It doesn't appear to get better. It doesn't do anything that improves the lives of the people. So eventually, and we're at that point where the unemployment rate is very high. Officially, unemployment and underemployment, the last time we checked, was 40%. But note that unemployment and underemployment has not been measured for at least 5 quarters now. That's 6 quarters. That's a very long time. It's gotten a lot worse since that time. So we have a lot of unemployed people. We have a lot of people who do not earn well. Again, when you convert our minimum wage of 30,000 Naira per month to USD, you find that it's at the official rate of $360. That's $83 a month. That's not enough to take anybody home. And then if we go back to the slides I presented earlier, a disproportionate amount of this is spent on just eating. Just eating. By the time you disaggregate that data, you find that the people at the lower end of the scale spend an even higher proportion of what they earn on food. This leads to frustration. I mean, you can't have a situation where, let's take people, my favorite example, people who live in 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗶 estate in 𝘆cie in Lagos. They live just opposite 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗶. 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗶 is a very, very poor area. And then the people in 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗶 look across to the people in 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗶 who can afford the basics of life. And it leads to feelings of envy, malice, and distrust. And it takes a small thing to tip it over. Now, one of the things that we do is, so I'll draw an analogy here. In 1962, some people tried to assassinate the French president, Charles de Gaulle. Why did that assassination attempt fail? Because they failed to consult a calendar. And the calendar would have told them that the sun would have set 10 minutes before they scheduled the assassination attempts. Why did I use that analogy? Basically, the last time that there were riots in Nigeria, relatively large-scale riots, which was the riots against South African businesses, timing of the day that those riots broke out was instrumental in preventing them from spreading. If those riots had broken out earlier in the day when a lot of people had energy, they would probably have gotten a lot worse. But the initial riots broke out in the evening, and pretty quickly afterwards, what did those riots turn into? They turned into harassing other people, more affluent people. The riots moved away from the stated target, which was South African businesses, to the so-called rich and wealthy. But there were many stories, anecdotally, where we saw people who, because they had been nice to area boys around them, they were protected. So these are things, in a country such as this, we need to find that balance. As to what the government can do, that's a very long story. I think done a while ago. And you can see it in the fact that despite a lot of lockdowns in various states, we still have incidents of violence going on unabated. I mean, as of yesterday evening, somebody identified as 𝗵𝗵𝗄𝗶 𝗍𝗵𝗄𝗶 was killed in Abuja in Surulere. As of this morning, we had a communal clash between the Chibok tribe and their Hausa settlers in Lamude LGA of Adamawa State. These are areas that are supposed to be under some sort of curfew, yet people are still finding time to have communal clashes and to fight themselves. What the government can do in the mid-term to sort all of these, I don't think there's any short-term solution anymore. I think that the pot has boiled over in many respects. But what can be done in terms of the medium term is the government has to be seen to be impartial. That's one of the complaints that we keep hearing in so many places. There's a feeling that the government is partial to certain sides. And as long as that feeling persists, then insecurity will remain an underlying issue.
All right, thank you very much, Etta. I mean, I think that I like the way you basically broke down the challenges and then how we can protect ourselves, even though some might find it very basic, but something as simple as just knowing the next guy out there, and it can be the difference between you protecting your lives and your property and you losing them. And I think we saw a bit of that in the Rwandan crisis, where a lot of people that were saved were also people that they know. But Cheta, something a bit related. I mean, if you can quickly just respond to this question. Movement around is also very, very important, especially transportation. And with COVID-19, people are worried. What's going to happen? Air travel, is it ever going to come back? Is it ever going to be the same? I remember when they had on pant bombers, I think that's what it's called, underwear bomber, and that basically also changed air travel across the world, where now you basically have to pat you down. And also for people who are, especially business travelers, people who are traveling on holiday, people in this industry, what should they be looking at? What has changed drastically, and is it ever going to be the same again? Quickly, please.
No, it's not going to be the same again. There's been a lot of drastic changes until a very decent vaccine is found for COVID-19. We are going to have airlines will be forced. They may not like it, but they will be forced to adopt some form of social distancing within their flights, which means that ticket prices will go up. So air travel is about to become a lot more expensive. On the positive side, for internal travel within a city such as Lagos, it's been proven that people can work from home. So people are going to become more open to the idea, which means that Lagos's notorious traffic jams will abate. There will still be traffic. Yeah, Lagos is a very badly planned city, so the traffic will not disappear, but the traffic will at least abate to some after a fashion. There's going to be a boost for land-based transport, forms of transportation, as ticket prices for air travel go up. Shipping lines, of course, it's cheaper to ship things over water. So shipping lines will see a boost, but I think the cruise ship model, shipping for pleasure, I think that's dead. And the reason I think that's dead is that the shipping industry generally has proven to be quite a good incubator for viruses. So with this pandemic, people are going to look at shipping lines and basically move away from that. But again, in summary, air travel will return, not to the same extent, because it's going to become more expensive. So you'll find a lot more people will actually take time to study and decide whether it is worth traveling. We're going to see fewer incidents of people just waking up and deciding that they want to move.
All right, thanks for that, Cheta. So I'm going to switch to Dr. Ola Brown now, and I mean, I think we've had a lot of quite maybe some of you might call it negative outlook there. But in all this, there's usually opportunities. Most crises that you see across the world, wherever it happens, there are always opportunities out there, and everybody is looking for investment opportunities. But as somebody who is vast in investing in small businesses in the country, Dr. Ola, where exactly do you see opportunities in all of this, especially for those who are out there? I've seen a lot of questions around what should I invest in? Is it agriculture? Is it health? Is the focus going to be on the health sector now? Is it fintech? If you're going to tell people, like, look, amidst all this doom and gloom, this is where we should be focusing on. Tell us, from your point of view, where are the investment opportunities that you see in all of this?
Okay, so first of all, I'll just put my slide back up. So events and physical events have sort of decreased in popularity, but online events, I think, and anything that facilitates online events, I think people are really, really looking for that. I posted a picture of myself in Mexico, and I flew to Mexico to give like an hour speech. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think that anything that has to do with the building the infrastructure of online events and making that sort of more seamless, making that more interactive. So you see things like house party, apps like, you know, Zoom, Teams, all coming up, and anything that can plug into those systems to make it easier to attend events from home, easier to make it work from home, easier to exercise from home. So stocks like, I think it's called 𝗶𝗄𝗄, they make those spinning bikes where you can have online gym classes. That's gone through the roof. So as much as some companies are doing badly in certain spaces, I think there's slight pivots that people have been able to make that are doing extremely, extremely well. And I don't think that those pivots would change post-COVID. So I used to drive 30 minutes to my yoga studio every single day. I don't do that anymore. I take all my yoga classes online now. And the yoga teacher that teaches me on YouTube has gone from like 4 million subscribers to 6 million subscribers in the last month on YouTube. So I think anything that facilitates us doing the things that we used to do outside at home, I think is a good investment. In terms of Nigerian investments, I go for strength right now. I've been looking at, you know, investing in the institutions that are probably too big to fail or too strong to fail. I won't mention any here, but in terms of where I've been making my bets, in terms of the Nigerian stock exchange, I've definitely been looking at financial strength. I've been looking at assets and thinking, you know, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What would it take for this institution to fail? So yeah, strong institutions for the Nigerian context. I also think in the telecoms industry, anything that helps you plug in to telecommunications is a good investment, because that's one of the mega trends, right? Use of the internet is one of the mega trends. Working from home is one of the mega trends that we see. Entertainment in and around the home. And then I would always say that a sure bet is agriculture. So we are cooking more at home, you know, slipping some boil and egg or something once or twice. So people are, you know, cooking more, doing more home cooking and buying more fresh food. That could be a trend that could continue. And also the delivery space. So famously, you know, Lagos banned okadas, and a few companies had to pivot from, you know, the transportation of people to the transportation of things. And people thought that was an awful move because there wasn't that much delivery. But now, you know, deliveries are, you know, becoming really an exciting space to play in. You mentioned healthcare. Now that depends on the law. Healthcare is actually a complex industry because you really can't have good healthcare for everybody in a country without the government investing in healthcare. And there's no telling whether, you know, the government is going to say after this COVID epidemic, whether it's going to go back to business as usual, and most of our budget will be spent paying back debt, paying salaries and buying Prados, or whether we're going to have a more sort of long-term forward-looking budget where, apart from, we know the Prados have to be bought, we know the salaries have to be paid, we know the debt has to be paid back, but maybe there will be more of a focus on healthcare and education. We don't know how that is going to go, but we know that Nigerians are going to eat. We know that Nigerians are going to spend more time at home. We know that Nigerians, you know, every single online course that I've signed up for, and I take a lot of online courses, right? There are always Nigerians on online courses, and that's only going to continue because there's the sort of jollof rice, you know, party side of Nigeria, but there's also a very, very academic and sort of geeky side of Nigeria as well. And the geeks will stop flying for courses or start taking online courses. If you're looking at online education as well, that's going to be a big thing. As more people are working from home, I think that more companies are going to stop doing physical training and start doing virtual training. So if we can get into that space, where you're training employees online and you're building infrastructure, you're building online courses that enable online education to take place. I think that would be a big trend going forward as well. So basically things around the house, food, and education, and maybe healthcare. I'm a bit in two minds about that.
All right, guys. I mean, like you've heard, if you missed this part, I'm sorry. Okay, maybe there'll probably be a video of this. Dr. Lars basically just laid it out there. Mostly online business, but let me just come back to you. So you're here and you're basically saying, look, pivot into online businesses or any business that is driven online. And then we've got the government over there. The government is saying agriculture. Right, and I've seen a few questions here around agriculture. Government is saying, let us move towards that direction because it creates all the jobs. What do you say to that? Is there some technology around agriculture that we can take advantage of, or is it something that maybe the government is probably wasting their time on? What's your view on agriculture?
So I'll go back to your point about online, and I'll say that if you're building an online business and build it for a global audience, don't just build it for a Nigerian business, Nigerian audience only. I mean, the Nigerian audience could be there, but if you build for a global audience, then you have a much bigger market size to play with. On the agriculture side, there's this belief that agriculture is going to employ a lot of people because it employs a lot of people now. But as you get better at agriculture and as the quality of your inputs increases, and as the level of mechanization increases, and as more educated people get into agriculture, it actually starts to employ less people. So I think there's a tension now. We desperately, our unemployment rate is high and we desperately need to get people working. But unfortunately, if they do start working and they start getting more productive and they start getting better at the business, then it doesn't actually require so many people. So I posted a video on Twitter about a robot herder. So they're using robot herders in America. And I'm like, all these farmer herder conflicts that we're having in Nigeria where people are killing themselves over who's going to herd cattle. In America, they're using robots to do that same thing. So I think, yes, in the short term, it may increase employment as more people get into it. But then as you start getting the productivity gains and you start having to compete with international markets, you are going to have to mechanize, you are going to have to automate, you are going to have to bring in technology, and then you lose the employment gains as that happens.
All right, thanks for that, Tola. So to the panelists, there's a lot of questions on the Q&A. At your spare time, as we're going on, you can just go there and respond to some of the questions. But I'm going to come to you now, Faye. I'm sure you must have been expecting this. You've got a serious counter view about agriculture, and it's something that you've said often on social media. It's right for those who care to follow. What do you think? Agriculture creates jobs, right? But is there a better way that you think the government should be doing this that can help create jobs and maybe industries? How do you think, what exactly is the government doing wrongly?
Well, I think my view about it is the idea that somehow agriculture is a solution, or it should be like a focus. I think the question is this, right? We have a government that has limited capacity, right? We know, this is the reality of being a Nigerian and in any country anyway, but the limitedness of capacity varies from country to country. So what we should always understand is that every time the Nigerian government focuses on one thing, the cost is building up elsewhere, because capacity is limited. So every time the government says we focus on this one thing, we should understand that even if we think that thing they are focusing on, even if we think that, it's a good thing, we should always understand the trade-offs. The fact that by focusing on this one thing, then where is the cost building up? And this has always been my problem with agriculture. Even if you don't do anything at all about agriculture in Nigeria, like don't even have a policy on agriculture, don't even have an agric minister, nothing. Agric will employ millions of people. Just in the nature of the way the Nigerian economy is. And this is because, like I always say, agriculture, farming chooses people. You know, they are not choosing farming. If you are born in a random village that is not connected to anywhere, it's a poor village, there's nothing going on there, there are no schools, no industries, nothing, you know, the first order of business for you is to farm the land. You know, so you're not really a farmer. You didn't choose farming because that's what you want to do, or that's what you have the skills for. But that's all you can do. You know, so at least, even if just to avoid dying, you know, you plant your own food and you grow your own food, and maybe if they have a bit extra left, maybe you might even trade by barter or exchange some of your food with somebody or sell some of it. So, you know, whether or not we do anything about agriculture, whether we have a policy or not, you know, agriculture employs millions of people automatically. And I'm using employment loosely here. So the question is, you know, by focusing on that, you know, what else? What are the other things that we will not have? You know, if the government's energies are directed towards agriculture, people are already in it. My view is that, you know, we need to find a way to start getting people out of it. You know, and the correlation between high number of people in agriculture and poverty is too striking for, and even if you close your eyes, you will see it. It is too striking for anyone to say, oh, nah, this is just a coincidence. So, you know, agriculture, farming and agriculture is almost like an incubator for poverty now we have in Nigeria. You know, it's not very productive, and there are even limits to how much you can achieve out of it. Meanwhile, there are other things that we can use to, you know, like kind of like a valve release, you know, where there's textile, there's light industry, and even if we can't do manufacturing, you know, one of the things that one of my favorite economists, Raghu Rajan, the former central bank governor of India, talks about, he said, look, for countries that are trying to develop, even if you can't do manufacturing, do construction, you know. And when you look at China, you know, when you look at the way China has done, the amount of investment, you know, they've had a lot of manufacturing, but the amount of investment-led growth that they had, whereby they're just building things, you know, building houses, building trains, building infrastructure, you know, that's one way whereby it's easier than manufacturing. So manufacturing, for example, you probably need to, you know, maybe you need to build for export. That takes time. But, you know, we can actually have an outlet whereby we use labor for construction. And believe it or not, we might have 150 million people, 200 million people, but construction labor is scarce in Nigeria. You know, it is one of the paradoxes of Nigerian economy whereby, you know, you have a lot of people, but skilled labor is scarce. And this has been going on for a long time, for longer than we realize. I mean, when the British came to Nigeria, you know, when they were trying to build the train track, this was in the 19th century, when they first started trying to build train tracks in the country, you know, they couldn't find people. They could, and this is, the story is almost exactly like you see today. They couldn't find until they started doing, they had to raise wages, pay a lot higher, and then, you know, try and do training and skilled labor. So we've always had this problem whereby we have a large population, which might be deceptive, but, you know, when it comes to skilled labor, and we need to find ways to get people out of agriculture and into diverse areas of the economy. You know, again, going back to Chetal's point, you know, I've always talked about the fact that, you know, we are spending so much money on feeding, and the more you spend on food, the less you can have on textiles, on entertainment. This has knock-on effects on Nollywood, on tailors, on everything. You know, we need to have as much different options for people to have. You know, we don't want people to have only agriculture as their option in life. It's not I mean, you might be looking at it that, oh, the person is employed in agriculture, but that's the only option that person has. So you're not doing anything good. You're not doing anything special. Even if you are not there, people will farm. What we need to do for active policy is to find ways whereby we can get people out of that. And then, you know, the ultimate end goal would then be, we have a situation whereby everyone who is a farmer is someone who decided to be a farmer. At that point, you have achieved something. Where everyone who is a farmer, I mean, here in the UK, for example, I mean, there are farmers. There are a lot of farms around me, but you can be anything else. You don't have to be a farmer. You can be an influencer. You can be anything you like. You know, when our end goal should be to that point whereby everybody who decides to be a farmer is someone who chose that option and they had other options. You know, not the fact that somebody was born and grew up into it and then we are deceiving ourselves and saying, oh, people are employed by agriculture. Even if you don't have a government, people will be employed by agriculture. So there's nothing special about it. It's a problem to be solved for us. You know, so I've always said, you know, just round up, you know, that's my view, that we should be moving towards a situation whereby those who are in agriculture are there because they chose it and they ignored they prefer to do agriculture over farming, over pharmacy, over banking, over something else, you know, and agriculture then becomes a proper employer where we can actually count it as something that is employing people gainfully.
Thanks a lot, 𝗧𝗍, for that. I'm going to come back to you though with something else that is very dear to me, and that's power. But I think that I should switch to 𝗧𝗏 for now. 𝗧𝗏, there was something, you know, you and I have also had this debate around agriculture, and I know that you have a very, very strong view as well. Do you think that there's a better way that the government should you know, be pushing agriculture? And just to segue a bit, 𝗧𝗏, there's also this little thing about agrotech that I've been seeing, all these agrotech investments. They're springing up, and government will tell you, are they not agriculture? It's their policies that is driving that. Where do you see the link?
Okay. There's a lot that 𝗧𝗍 said, especially about agriculture, that needs to be unpacked, but I think time is not our friend anymore. First, the real thing that can unleash agricultural productivity in Nigeria, two things: value add and security. So let's take security. We have a herders-farmers conflict going on in large swathes of our middle belt, and has seeped into the south. That's all three south geopolitical zones: south, south, southeast, and southwest. It has also seeped into the northwest, and Nigeria, as a matter of fact, has a large number of refugees in Niger Republic and Cameroon, and Nigeria has the 7th largest number of internally displaced people in the world. Very important. We don't have a declared war, yet we have the 7th largest number of internally displaced people in the world. Most of these people are people who would have farmed the land in the first place. I have personally spoken with farmers in Benue and Nasarawa who at the time I spoke to them, had not been to harvest in 3 years. Why? Because they were afraid of being attacked, their wives being raped, all sorts of things. These are things that is where the government's policies need to focus on. Another thing that government's policies need to focus on very seriously is financial inclusion. You can't have this situation where, for example, the Anchor Borrowers Program. Truth is, the Anchor Borrowers Program has failed. Why did it fail? Lack of financial inclusion. When you carry cash, hard cash, and go and give people, you expect them to go and, they will take the cash and go and marry wives. That's what happened. If, on the other hand, they have been made to open accounts and the money was given to them as loans, which they had to return at certain points with due collateral, we would have seen a difference. The first thing I want to point out with respect to this whole agric thing is we've not taken advantage of our geopolitical location to take advantage of our comparative advantage. We are located in a place where we could actually produce, for example, shea butter, which is an essential component of cosmetics the world over. Almost every bottle of L'Oreal, cocoa butter, whatever, has shea butter. We produce a lot of it, but we don't process it. Imagine if we process those things, or even cashew. A lot of cashew is produced in Kogi State and then taken in the raw form and taken out to Vietnam, where it is processed. Value is added to it in Vietnam, and then it is brought back to us. So these are things that we need to take into consideration. We also need to take into consideration climate change. Climate change is a big problem. And then finally, as to the points 𝗧𝗍 made earlier, and forgive me, I'm rushing because of time, the skill sets in Nigeria, and this affects not just the agricultural sector, but everything. The skill sets in Nigeria is broad, but it's not deep. We need to have deliberate actions to deepen our skill sets. Otherwise, we will be here in 30 years' time, all of us with serious white hair, except you, Ugo, your hair is already very white. We'll be here in 30 years' time, and we'll still be saying the same thing. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, 𝗧𝗏. So let me quickly go back to 𝗧𝗍. While you get ready, I have a few questions for you, but let me go back to 𝗧𝗍. 𝗧𝗍, I mean, you've talked a lot about agriculture, and I like the way you sort of brought in construction. And like we've always said, it's about time we diversify the economy, like they say. I mean, a lot of us know that the economy is diversified. It's just government that needs to diversify its import earnings. And I like how you brought construction to the fore. And construction relies a lot on power. And we all know the challenges in the power sector. You know, I'm highly associated with that sector personally. You've been in the UK and you've seen how the power sector runs there. What exactly is the government doing wrongly? I think it's important that for everybody to just know what should we be doing, you know, from your own point of view, that should get the power sector to where it should be so that it can support industries like the construction sector, like you very well described from your own point of view.
Okay, I think when it comes to power, I think one of the things that we've sort of haven't really figured out is how to have a market. Now, you know, I know a lot of people start running now, you know, but basically a power market is, one of the things that's, just to use the UK, since you mentioned the UK, to use the UK as an example, one of the things that's happened now is that when we entered lockdown, a lot of people obviously stopped going to the offices. Offices were shut down and everything. Everyone was at home. Now everyone is at home, and everyone is obviously using the internet more. You know, running electricity more. But you know, the power industry is in a serious trouble because when you look at it, you know, the bulk of the majority of their revenues or earnings comes from offices. You know, that's what, so the idea that all of a sudden we've shut down offices and businesses, and then we're having to rely on people at home. Residential is a small part. It's a small part of the whole thing. Again, to use another example, many years ago in California, I don't know if you remember, California, they had a rolling power blackout. You know, again, they had a market, right? Yeah. Industries paid a certain amount, residences paid a certain amount. Politicians got in there and they now realized that, oh, we can start playing games with these things by basically keeping the residential bills low, you know, as a giveaway, or even cutting it down. You know, meanwhile piling all the cost on industries. Again, this is the whole point of the market. It's a fine balance. You know, everybody will never be able to pay the same amount. The challenge for any power industry is to basically find out the people who can pay, collect it from them, and then use it to subsidize the people who cannot really pay. And the dynamics are different in different countries. In some countries, it is industries. So you charge the industry as much as you can charge them, and then smooth it out and use that to, you know, subsidize people. So I think one of the challenges we've had in Nigeria is that we don't really have that market yet. A lot of the conversation about power comes to residential people. You know, everyone is talking about, oh, prepaid meters, and everyone is talking about estimated billing, and it's always a big fight. Everyone is angry about these things, about how much they're being asked to pay. The challenge is that we don't have that market yet, that we have not built that market, whereby, you know, unfortunately, a large chunk of the people who should be brought into that market are on their own. They're generating their own power. So industries, all these people, they're out of the loop. Meanwhile, if we bring everyone into a pool, again, just use a different example. Just imagine insurance. Say you wanted to do health insurance policy, right? And then before that, a lot of rich people already had their own health insurance policy privately. Maybe they were insuring themselves abroad or whatever, you know. And then the government now says, "Oh, we want to have health insurance." So the government now decides that they will do health insurance for only poor people or sick people. In no time, that thing will go broke, because you need healthy people to be inside the pool. The people who will pay their premiums and they are healthy, but they will not need to go to hospital. They will not need to make claims. You need to use them to fund those who are sick and who don't have enough money. So everyone has to be together inside that same pool. Otherwise, it's a mess. If you have a pool whereby it's only sick people, then the thing will go bankrupt quickly. So this is the same thing we're having, the same challenge we're having with our power industry, that we have a pool whereby people like the big people like the Dangotes and all these people, they're all generating their own electricity. Meanwhile, the discos, you guys, the power industry people, they're trying to make money, squeezing water from a rock by basically having mainly residential people inside it. So we need to have a kind of policy whereby we bring everyone inside together, whereby those who can pay, those who can pay, who can be charged higher, who have higher consumption, we can then use that to smooth out for everyone else. So whereby it subsidizes residential land, and that's the long and short of it. That is how you have a market, a power market, and is what is the same in every country. If you go to every country, it's only when you have a pandemic like this that you begin to see it. Otherwise, you will not see it. It's not obvious to the eye. You know, like I said, it was lockdown that revealed a lot of it in the UK, whereby the bulk of payments come from offices. When offices are shut, all of a sudden there were warnings a couple of weeks ago. I think they've stabilized it now, but there were some warnings here a couple of weeks ago that we might have to deal with blackouts. You know, but again, thankfully we didn't have blackouts. But now offices are starting to open up, back open again. So you know, again, think of it as a big basket, a big pool. You know, everybody, you have to have as much people as possible inside our pool. All the people who are outside of the power market currently now, the challenge is how to bring everybody together so that we can then smooth the cost. The people who, it will always be a kind of 80-20 thing. It will never be 50-50. It will never be each man, one person, you know, for one man for himself, you know. Some 20% of the people will probably bear 80% of the cost, and then you smooth it out. And that's part of being a society. That is what it is. That's part of being a market. That's what, you know, that is how we are together in a society. You know, we have to, you know, there has to be a kind of give and take here. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we've had with our power industry in Nigeria, that we've just not been able to create that kind of market whereby everything, you know, everyone is together inside the same pool, and then we can work from there.
Yeah, fantastic, Faye, because that's basically what they call cross subsidies in the power market, and I think it's something that would help us a lot. And let's have a power industry that is market driven rather than the one that has government controlling prices. So I'm going to move to you now, Wale. Wale, there are a lot of questions here around something that you said. I think Cheta kind of re-echoed that as well. You had mentioned something around the banking sector and the risk. That you know might probably accrue to that sector because of a lot of all these policies. And then you also said something about investments, sort of fund flows, liquidity moving to other asset classes. So as an investor out there, and a lot of our guys who are logged in here are listening. Oh, by the way, guys, please, sorry, this extended more than the 2 hours that we planned for. It's been a very, very engaging discussion. I'm sure that we've all picked up one or two nuggets here. But Wale, back to that question. So for those who are looking for where to invest in, right? And when I'm talking invest, I'm talking about either the money market or the stock market, or even for forex market, or even foreign stocks. What do you advise people do with their money now? Where should they be investing in?
Okay, I'm going to put on my retail investor cap now. Yeah. So interest rates, as I said earlier, are going to be quite low. And of course, we've seen money market rates come down since last year. I mean, 1 year treasury bill is around 3%. So, I mean, that's really not what's your time. Now it's time to look for other investments that gives you a better return. Now, if you look at the equities market, I mean, I think Dr. Ola did a bit on trying to talk about names or sectors that people should look at. I mean, I think one sector people should be looking at is telecoms, because as you said earlier, I mean, a lot of people are going to be working from home, and because a lot of people in the telecommunications companies, I think it was MTN was saying they saw massive growth in data usage just in the period, in the last month of Q1. I'm sure that number has most likely risen in the second quarter, because a lot of people are now using data. I mean, we're online now. More people are going to be using data over the next one, at least during the period of lockdowns. And so what that means is that telecoms companies will see growth in revenues as well as in earnings as well. Other sectors are also, typically for Nigeria, when you see devaluations and also the government's going to this kind of phase, some sectors like agriculture sort of benefit as well. So you're going to see a bit of agri names sort of look to do very well, because a lot of people would always have to shift towards local supply chains, because the global supply chain just wouldn't be there around this period. But away from the stock market, I think, I think we sort of hinted at it, although it's not always something to say, but as a retail investor, I think now also, as always, I think it's gradually become a part of investing in Nigeria is to always have exposure to USD linked instruments. And that's just because the Naira is linked to crude oil prices. Crude oil prices in the last decade have come down. So what that means is that increasingly the Naira outlook is one that is weak. And so if that's the case, then of course, you should look for stronger currencies to sort of try to reduce the risk of that. So naturally, you're going to see a lot more people investing in USD linked instruments. There are a lot of options available for people now to invest in US equities, Eurobond funds, and things like that. So I would generally always say that these also form an outlet to sort of think actively, because going forward, the outlook is for a weaker Naira, just because and where we are. I mean, the last decade has shown that we were coming in 2010, crude oil prices were $100 a barrel. I mean, since 2014, we haven't gotten back to those levels, and it's unlikely we'll get back to those levels because increasingly people are focusing on renewables generally, and of course, this COVID has exposed a lot of issues around. This COVID is going to drive a lot of reduction in transportation and things like that. So generally, crude oil demand is going to be much weaker going forward. So I think time for a country that is hedged or a country that is focused entirely on or our exchange rate is placed, the foundation of our exchange rate really is crude oil, then of course it just means looking to other investments away from the Naira will sort of help protect value. So USD linked investments, US equities, Eurobond funds. You have a lot of Eurobond funds also coming as well. I think those will be options for people to sort of consider. Importantly, if you have plans to maybe purchase things abroad, I mean, or if you have a portion of bills that you always have to pay abroad, school fees, hospital bills, all kinds of things you have to do abroad. Naturally, the focus would always be to ensure that you always try a portion of your investment should be dedicated to USD linked instruments or USD linked assets. Away from the traditional investment space, I think now is also the time for people to look at. I mean, I think Dr. Lad mentioned quite a lot: e-commerce businesses that are online, pharmaceutical businesses. I think maybe I skipped this. Pharma could also be an opportunity because there's going to be a lot of focus on healthcare. Maybe the government may not have to be able to finance that, but the private sector will focus on healthcare over the near to medium term. So it's going to be something that I think is going to receive a lot of attention. And because it's going to receive a lot of attention, it means people if you structure things around healthcare, maybe provisional, or just basically getting a structure for health, hospitals, pharma. Generally, I think Nigeria is going to have to relook at our healthcare system, but less on the government, more on the private sector. So I think there's probably an opportunity there one way or the other. Yeah. I think I summarized most of it. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Wale, for that. I think we're almost at the end of my own side of this session. If all the panelists can just switch on their cameras, I'm going to ask you guys at Nairametrics, there's something we call buy, sell, or hold. So buy, sell, or hold is basically me putting you on the spot, asking you a question. Buy means a positive, sell means a negative, and then hold means you want to be neutral on this. So I'm going to start with Dr. Ola. Dr. Ola, if you're there, the world is going to get a vaccine before October. Buy, sell, or hold?
October. Hold.
Hold. All right. Good one. So I'm going to switch now to Faye. Faye, Nigeria will avoid a recession. Buy, sell, or hold?
Sell.
Oh my God. Sell. It's kind of easy. So I'm going to move to Cheta. Cheta, I'm looking for a very good one for you, trying to put you on the spot here. The government is going to take away fuel subsidy. The government is going to reverse its agriculture policy. Buy, sell, or hold?
They are going to do everything. So.
Sell. Oh, so they are going. Wait, I didn't get that. Are you saying that they are going to do away with fuel subsidy?
They will be forced to do away with everything.
So that's a buy then. So you're buying that.
That's a buy, yeah.
That's a buy. All right, buy for you. Now, so to Wale, I think you pretty much, talked about the valuation. So, and I'm going to ask you right now, the CBN will have no choice but to launch a floating exchange rate system before the end of the year. Buy, sell, or hold.
So wait, a hold would mean
The neutral.
Yes. They
Hey, ho.
won't do it. They won't do it. They won't do it.
What are you going for? A
Sell.
sell?
They won't do it.
It's
Sell. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to switch on to Wade. Wade, if you can turn on your camera, I'm going to also ask you as well, Wade. I'm going to ask you as well, Wade. So I don't know if you can come online. You are more of a private sector SME person. Is Wade there? Wade? Yeah. So are you ready for the buy, sell, or hold?
On which one?
Buy, sell, and I'm going to ask you a question now. So, but you're ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, buy, sell, or hold. Oil. I'm going to talk about oil now because you're very much experienced in this area. So, for Nigeria, and for the world in general, buy, sell, or hold. Oil prices are going to go above $50 before the end of the year. Buy, sell, or hold.
I'll buy.
Buy. Oh my God, that's a positive outlook out there. All right, thanks very much, panelists. Truly enjoyed this session. I'm sure a lot of the participants out here enjoyed every single contribution that you've all made. Thank you very much all for listening, for watching or listening or streaming. There's going to be another version come end of second quarter 2020. We do this once every quarter. Nairametrics Economic Summit, Economic Outlook. Thank you very much. We've had an amazing time. I've learned so much from these guys. I'm used to being the guy. I've been asked questions on the webinars, seeing guys that are so much more intelligent than I am, and I've learned a lot from them. So over to you, Wade, to give us a recap and then close the session. Thank you very much, guys. You can also switch the camera now. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone for joining the session. Dr. Ola, I learned so many new things today, but two critical things I learned, and I'll start with
What it looks like.
First and foremost, okay, they've unmuted me now. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Ola, I'll start with you. And I like the analogy that you use, and I'm going to use that analogy to round up today. The world is about people, and without people, the world will never go round. So no matter how much technology we advance in terms of robots or artificial intelligence, without people thinking, the world is really not going to go to the next level. So when you look at what has been said today, it all revolves around people. If people don't move, the virus doesn't move. And if people don't move, ideas will never move. So basically, with people, you look at so many things that they impact in terms of the world and global economy, and just everything global, from the economy, demand and supply, which has been handed upon, especially by FEI, in terms of the power sector, in terms of logistics and business, even in terms of agriculture. The opportunities that are dwelling in these areas in terms of infrastructure for online facility, where we've seen that more and more people can work remotely. So I guess organizations and individuals will start looking at that. Another thing in terms of that is I think those project developers, especially those in the housing sector, should start looking at putting infrastructures that would help cater for some form of power during downtimes in terms of electricity. So looking at maybe people creating small studies that have inverters that can help them run and work from home. That's in terms of infrastructure. In terms of security, Cheta said something which was really, really relevant, because wealth is not being created at the rate at which it should be. So also people providing their own form of security in places where they are not very sure creates that additional flow of wealth to the poorer sector. So you park in a place, look for people to look after your car. The 500 naira, you don't know how much it goes and how long it goes in terms of what people are doing. Also in terms of health, like Dr. Ola started, people don't move, the virus doesn't move. People are unhealthy, the global economy is unhealthy, and we've seen that with this pandemic. So generally speaking, one of the things that has happened is that people have shown again that they are the most dominant force in economics, whether it's health, security, power, and so on and so forth. And the last thing I would say before I hand over to Ugo is, in terms of the pandemic, two things that one thing that I have seen and that can change the way a lot of us think and would improve generally the economy of Nigeria is in terms of skill. Whether you are diversifying your skill, like 𝗬𝗵𝗲 said, in terms of agriculture, so that at the end of the day, you know that agriculture is your mainstay and you are not being chosen by agriculture. And skill improvement. Cheta said something about construction. And 𝗬𝗲 said something about construction. If you improve your skills, being learned doesn't mean you can't be a bricklayer. It just means that you can bring in new techniques and new skills that can improve the way things are done. And then finally, I want to thank everybody who joined in. Over 500 people joined in at a point in time. I want to tell you thank you. And at the end of the day, we're looking forward to the next session, which is also going to be a webinar, because that's the new normal. And that's how we're going to ensure that we protect our lives, and at the end of the day, we protect our money. Thank you. And Ugo, I hand back over to you. Hello, Ugo, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Wadi. Thanks, everybody. Remember that we're going to send a video of this, a recording of this session to everyone who has participated. A link will be shared pretty soon by the Nairametrics team. As usual, visit nairametrics.com if you're looking for anything financial related or business related news and information. And if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, subscribe to our stock select newsletter. It's a newsletter for anyone who is invested in the stock market and looking for stock ideas as well. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to 𝗬𝗲. Thank you to Dr. Ola. Thank you to Cheta. Thank you to Wale. And then to the Nairametrics team who put this together. Amazing job to all of you. You guys have worked tirelessly over the last few days to ensure that everything works out well, and I think it's worked out really, really well. If you can see some of the names here, these are the the names of some of the guys in Nairametrics who put everything here together for you. They're also going to be putting a summary article of everything that has been said here. We'll put it in the article as well, so that you can have something you can discern on. And then some of the questions that we couldn't take on today, we're going to be sending to the panelists, and they'll try as much as possible to respond to some of those questions. Thanks once again, everybody, and then enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you very much. Goodbye to everyone.